In 6 days, the FIA opens a formal review that could reshape the entire 2026 season. It is called ADUO, and most fans have never heard of it. But every team principal in the paddock is thinking about it right now, because ADUO decides which manufacturers get extra engine development, and which ones stay frozen. Mercedes leads the championship by nearly 70 points. They arrive in Canada with their first major car upgrade of the year. And the reason they are bringing it now is not about Canada. It is about what comes after. The 2026 season has belonged to Mercedes from the moment the lights went out in Melbourne. George Russell won the season opener. Kimi Antonelli then reeled off 3 consecutive victories from pole position, winning the Chinese Grand Prix, the Japanese Grand Prix, and the Miami Grand Prix. At 19 years, 6 months, and 17 days old, Antonelli became the youngest pole sitter in Formula One history at Shanghai, breaking a record Sebastian Vettel held since Monza in 2008. After his win at Suzuka, at 19 years and 216 days, he became the youngest driver to ever lead the Formula One World Championship, beating Lewis Hamilton, who was just past 22 when he first topped the standings in 2007. 4 races, 4 wins, 4 poles converted, 3 of them by a teenager. On paper, Mercedes is dominant. Nobody paid much attention to the detail underneath those results until Miami. Antonelli sits on 100 points. Russell has 80. Charles Leclerc is third with 59. Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton are tied on 51. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes holds 180 points to Ferrari's 112 and McLaren's 96. The gap looks comfortable. It is not. Because while Mercedes raced the exact same car it rolled out of the Barcelona pre-season test in February, every rival around them was upgrading, and that choice was deliberate. Mercedes technical director, James Allison, described the 2026 regulation reset as a wholesale transformation of almost every aspect of the car. The team's pre-season approach reflected that ambition. At the Barcelona test, the W17 completed 502 laps across 3 days, the highest mileage of any team on the grid, 151 laps on day 1, 183 on day 2, 168 on day 3, over 2,300 kilometers without a single significant technical failure. Senior race engineer Andrew Chauvelin said afterward that it was the biggest project they had ever done as a team, and that the priority was keeping the car on track and learning at a good rate. That learning-first philosophy carried into the season. While other teams split their development budget across incremental upgrades at every race, Mercedes chose to bank everything into one coordinated package. Only 2 minor components went to Miami. The rest of the development energy went into what arrives this weekend. Ferrari arrived in Miami with 11 new components on the SF26. McLaren brought 7. Red Bull brought 7. And in that Miami weekend, the competitive picture shifted in a way that sent a jolt through the Mercedes garage. Norris won the sprint. Red Bull, which had been more than a second off the pace at the start of the season, suddenly appeared at the sharp end of the field. Toto Wolff called it a big surprise, noting that Red Bull made a huge step forward from over a second behind to being right there. Mercedes still won the Grand Prix, but the margins were different. The gaps were smaller, and Wolff admitted publicly that Mercedes had been out of sync with their upgrades. That gap between Mercedes standing still and everyone else developing is about to close. Because this weekend at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal, Mercedes finally responds. The package Mercedes is bringing to Canada is not a minor revision. It is the team's first major in-season development step of 2026, and it touches almost every aero surface on the front half of the W17. Start with the front wing. Mercedes has carried a unique active aerodynamics interpretation since the Barcelona test. Under the 2026 regulations, the front wing must include an active element that changes angle to manage downforce levels at different speeds. Most teams rotate the entire upper flap. Mercedes chose a different path. Only the tertiary plane of the front wing rotates, with the mounting pylons fixed to the secondary plane below it. That design choice defined the W17's aero philosophy from day one. And the revised front wing arriving in Canada builds on that same architecture, but with updated elements designed to improve the airflow it sends rearward. That airflow change is the key. Because the front wing does not exist in isolation, it shapes how air reaches the front suspension, the side pods, the floor, and ultimately the diffuser, which generates the majority of the car's downforce. So when Mercedes redesigns the front wing elements, the ripple effect touches everything behind it. That is exactly what this package does. New carbon fiber covers over the front suspension reshape the channels that direct air around the wheels. The floor itself carries revised geometry to work with the new flow pattern coming from the updated wing. Italian technical reporting describes this as a completely new airflow concept, not a surface-level tweak. Beyond the aerodynamics, Mercedes is introducing a lighter gearbox casing. The W17 has been running above the 768 kg minimum weight limit, which means the team cannot position ballast wherever it wants to optimize the car's balance window. A lighter gearbox frees up mass that can be redistributed as ballast, and in a formula where a kilogram in the wrong place costs hundredths of a second per lap, that flexibility changes the car's handling character in ways the stopwatch alone does not fully capture. But the most critical piece of the package has nothing to do with aerodynamics or weight. New electronics and start procedure software are designed to address the W17's chronic race start weakness. Antonelli has dropped places off the line at every single Grand Prix start in 2026, despite qualifying on pole 3 times. The root cause has been traced to the W17's unusually large turbocharger. When the lights go out, the turbo creates lag in the initial power delivery, and Antonelli loses positions before he even reaches the first braking zone. The deeply frustrating part for Mercedes is that McLaren, running the exact same Mercedes power unit, has already found ways to mitigate this issue with their own software calibration. Mercedes, the manufacturer that built the engine, has not managed to solve it on their own car. Until now. The estimated total gain from the full package sits at around 0.3 of a second per lap. That figure comes from detailed Italian technical reporting and reflects the combined aero, weight, and start improvements. Mercedes has been careful not to confirm any number publicly. Wolff said only that performance is only performance once it is delivered on track. The package was developed under Deputy Technical Director Simone Resta, and it represents weeks of wind tunnel and computational fluid dynamics work at the team's Brackley headquarters in England. And this is where the risk factor becomes impossible to ignore. Canada 2026 is a sprint weekend, the first sprint format ever held at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. That means Mercedes gets exactly one practice session, 60 minutes of track time on Friday morning, before sprint qualifying begins that same evening. There is no FP2, no overnight window to evaluate data and recalibrate. Whatever Mercedes learns about the upgrade in that single hour is what they carry into competitive running for the rest of the weekend. For a package this size, involving a revised front wing, a new floor, reshaped suspension covers, a lighter gearbox, and new electronics, 60 minutes is extraordinarily tight. If the wind tunnel data correlates cleanly with what the car actually does on track, Mercedes walks out of Montreal with an even larger performance advantage than they carried into the weekend. If the correlation is off, if the new front wing behaves differently in the real world than it did in the controlled environment at Brackley, Mercedes is stuck with a car that could be slower than the one they brought to Miami, and they have no practice time to untangle the problem before points are on the line. Wolff knows this. His language heading into the weekend is precisely calibrated. He talks about responding to competitors, about building momentum through 7 races in 10 weekends before the August shutdown, about staying balanced and not getting too high or too low. To the outside world, it reads like measured confidence. But underneath the careful phrasing, the message to McLaren and Ferrari and Red Bull is unmistakable. Mercedes is done holding back. The development war starts now. While all of this plays out on the chassis side of the championship, a completely separate battle is unfolding inside the FIA's engine regulatory framework. And this battle might matter more than any front wing or floor upgrade Mercedes brings to any circuit this year. ADUO stands for Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities. It is the single most important regulatory mechanism in the 2026 power unit rules, and it was designed with one specific historical lesson in mind. In 2014, Mercedes introduced a turbocharged hybrid power unit that was so far ahead of Ferrari, Renault, and Honda that the advantage lasted for nearly a decade. The other manufacturers were locked into engine specifications with limited development allowance, unable to close the gap fast enough. Fans complained, teams complained. The FIA vowed it would never happen again. ADUO is the mechanism built to prevent that repeat. After a set number of races, the FIA measures how far each manufacturer's internal combustion engine falls behind the benchmark, which is set by the best-performing power unit on the grid. If a manufacturer sits within 2% of that benchmark, their development is frozen. No in-season upgrades. If they fall between 2 and 4% behind, they are granted one additional upgrade during the current season and one for the following year. If the gap reaches 4% or more, they get 2 upgrades in season and 2 for the next year. And if a manufacturer finds itself more than 10% behind, the FIA opens an entirely new bracket with additional development budget worth up to $11 million on top of the standard cost cap. The first formal ADUO evaluation takes place after the Canadian Grand Prix. The FIA has 2 weeks to publish results, and the outcome could fundamentally alter the competitive trajectory of the 2026 championship. Ferrari is widely expected to qualify for ADUO relief. The deficit between the Ferrari and Mercedes internal combustion engines is estimated at somewhere between 20 and 29 horsepower. Mercedes is producing roughly 576 horsepower. Ferrari sits closer to 547. That gap places Ferrari comfortably inside the 4% threshold, which means Maranello would be granted 2 in-season engine upgrades and 2 additional upgrades for 2027. But the detail that reshapes the strategic picture is this. Ferrari's upgraded engine is not arriving in Canada. It is not arriving at the Monaco Grand Prix. The most recent Italian reporting places the first Ferrari ADUO engine upgrade at the Belgian Grand Prix in late July. That is round 10 of 22. Maranello still has combustion chamber modifications and turbo vane work to finish before the new power unit is ready to race. That delay creates a window, a finite, clearly defined window of 6 to 7 races in which Mercedes can use pure chassis development to build such a large points buffer that even a significant Ferrari engine upgrade cannot close the gap in time for the championship. Count the races: Canada, Monaco, Spain, Austria, Britain, possibly Hungary before Belgium arrives. That is the window, and every indication from Brackley suggests that Mercedes has built its entire 2026 development strategy around exploiting it. Consider the evidence. Mercedes held back upgrades through 4 Grand Prix wins. They watched every rival bring parts to Miami. They absorbed the data on where the competition improved. And they chose to deploy their entire first development package at the exact moment the ADUO clock starts ticking. Every point Mercedes banks between now and Belgium is a point Ferrari has to claw back with a faster engine that does not exist yet. Honda sits in a different category entirely. The Honda power unit, which runs in the back of both Aston Martin cars, is reported to be more than 10% behind the benchmark. The FIA created the above 10% bracket specifically because the Honda deficit was so severe it fell outside the original ADUO framework. Aston Martin has scored 0 points in 2026. Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll are racing with a fundamental power disadvantage that no chassis upgrade can compensate for. Even with maximum ADUO relief, Honda's first upgraded engine is months away from reaching the grid. The 2026 championship is being fought on 2 separate timelines. The chassis timeline, where Mercedes makes its first move this weekend in Montreal, and the engine timeline, where the FIA is about to unlock the door for Ferrari and Honda to begin closing the horsepower gap. The team that manages both timelines wins the title. And there is a third constraint that nobody can escape: the cost cap. Wolff named it explicitly after Miami, calling it one of the variables that will play a role in the development race. Every part Mercedes bolts onto the W17 in Canada comes out of a finite budget. Every wind tunnel hour spent validating this package is a wind tunnel hour that cannot be spent on the next upgrade. If the Canada package works, the investment pays for itself in championship points. If it does not, Mercedes has burned a chunk of its annual development budget on a dead end, and every rival that spread their spending more evenly gains a relative advantage. McLaren is the team Mercedes is watching most carefully. Norris and Oscar Piastri finished 2nd and 3rd in the Miami Grand Prix, and Norris took the sprint. McLaren runs the same Mercedes power unit, which means their chassis improvements translate directly into lap time without an engine penalty. Any gap McLaren closes is pure aerodynamic and mechanical progress, and it tells Mercedes exactly how far their own chassis advantage has eroded. McLaren is also preparing its own upgrade for the next block of races. If Mercedes stumbles in Canada and McLaren delivers, the Constructors' Championship could tighten by 30 or 40 points inside a month. Montreal's circuit Gilles Villeneuve is a peculiar place to debut a major aero package. It is a low downforce, stop-start layout with long full-throttle sections and heavy braking zones. Historically, performance at Montreal has been difficult to extrapolate to high downforce circuits like Barcelona, which follows just 2 weeks later. Mercedes' own engineers have described Montreal as an outlier in previous seasons. That means even a dominant result in Canada does not guarantee the upgrade translates to Spain, and a difficult result in Canada does not necessarily prove the package has failed. The real validation comes at Barcelona, the circuit every team in the paddock treats as the most honest test of overall car performance. But the points scored in Montreal are real, regardless of the circuit's quirks. A dominant Mercedes weekend, both cars on the podium, extends the constructors' lead past 80 points and puts serious daylight between Antonelli and the rest of the Drivers' Championship before the European stretch begins. A bad weekend, where the upgrade misbehaves and McLaren or Ferrari capitalize, compresses the standings at exactly the moment the ADUO review is being finalized. There are 3 specific things to watch this weekend that will tell the real story. First, qualifying pace. If Mercedes locks out the front row again, the aero upgrade has delivered. If Norris or a Ferrari splits the two Mercedes cars, the advantage is already thinner than Brackley expected. Second, the race start. If Antonelli holds position off the line for the first time all season, the electronics fix works. If he drops places again despite the new software, Mercedes has a deeper mechanical problem with the turbo that software alone cannot solve. Third, the gap to McLaren in race pace. McLaren shares the same engine. Any lap time difference between the two teams is pure chassis performance. If that gap shrinks below a tenth per lap in race conditions, Mercedes' aero advantage is disappearing faster than the points table suggests. As of today, Mercedes leads every classification in Formula One. Antonelli leads the drivers' standings by 20 points. The team leads the constructors by 68. The W17 has qualified on the front row and won at every single circuit it has raced. And yet the team's own boss is publicly acknowledging that rivals have closed the gap and that the development race is what will decide this championship. The Canada upgrade either confirms that Mercedes can stay ahead while the entire field develops around them, or it reveals that 4 wins from 4 was the high watermark of a team about to be caught. 7 races in 10 weekends. The ADUO review opening in days. Ferrari's engine upgrade loaded for Belgium. And 60 minutes of practice in Montreal to validate the biggest single development gamble of the 2026 season. The title fight is not starting in Canada. It already started. Canada is where Mercedes finds out if they are winning it.